Hello and welcome to the Raw review here on Wrestling with Regret. Well, it's good to be back reviewing Raw this week. I skipped the last episode. I was told I didn't miss too much, so with Backlash looming just 6 days away, would this show be one to watch? Let's find out and see. The show's meant to open up with a rematch between Asuka and Charlotte Flair. They fought in a champion versus champion match last week. It ended with a count-out victory for Charlotte. So after Asuka's entrance, before Charlotte comes out, we see Sasha Banks and Bayley, the new women's tag team champions, interrupt, and they put over how good they are, how many belts they've won. Asuka's about had enough of them. Then Charlotte appears and says, oh look, the tag champs are brand hopping just like the Queen is. And before long, the Iconics appear, and their main purpose in this segment is to announce to everyone that there's going to be a triple threat match for the women's tag belts at Backlash. It's going to be Bayley and Sasha, the Iconics, and Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross. So then Charlotte and Bayley and Sasha are talking more trash to each other, and Charlotte says, I don't need a belt to be relevant, and no matter how many belts you guys have, you're still garbage. They all has fight. All 6 women all has fight. They all get into a scrap, and before you know it, we have a 3-team tag team match. You've got the unlikely duo of Charlotte and Asuka, the Iconics, and Sasha and Bayley. I think everyone looked pretty good in this match. People had chances to get their moments and stuff. The story here is the lack of chemistry between Asuka and Charlotte. They're kind of tagging each other in and out at inopportune moments, but the miscommunication doesn't matter because Charlotte and Asuka win anyway. Asuka tags in Charlotte before the moonsault, and she goes and puts the Asuka lock on Billie Kay to win. Established teams. Who needs them? So then after the match, Charlotte gets one more cheap shot on Asuka, and that's how we end the thing. We'll find out these two are going to have their singles match later in the night. So last week, Seth Rollins planned a retirement ceremony for Rey Mysterio, and then Rey was on kind of like a Zoom chat later in the night saying, still up in the air whether or not he's going to retire. Then Dominic Mysterio comes in, gets pretty heated, and so this week's a follow-up interview with Rey, and before that happens though, Seth Rollins shows up and takes Byron Saxton's place on commentary. He wants to talk directly to Rey here. And what I liked about this promo here is it's more of a health update from Rey. The eye's still, it's healing, but no timetable when I'm going to return. He makes a threat to Seth Rollins, and then Seth, tries to talk more sense into Rey. He wants him, one more chance to go out a legend and bring your son Dominic next week, and the two of you can have it all, make good or whatever. And I liked the way they did this because it was a way, even though it was not a live conversation, you could tell that the stuff with Rey was clearly pre-taped, but Seth interacting and talking to the camera through the headset and everything, I thought that was a really creative way to get the story further across. It was a bit different, so I liked that. And then after Rey issues some more threats, out comes Aleister Black. He literally just pops into the shot to attack Seth. It's going to be Aleister and Humberto Carrillo taking on the Messiah Maniacs, Austin Theory and I was going to call him Buddy Murphy. Always Buddy Murphy in my heart. Buddy's just officially Murphy here. It was a short and sweet matchup here, and it ends, again, different. Different is good sometimes. The finish here is just Aleister just kicking Buddy in the head when he's on the top rope, and he just falls over, and that's enough to pin him. I've not seen that finish in a while, if ever, so different. I like it. Then after the match, Rey Mysterio's music hits, but psych, it's Seth Rollins wearing a Rey Mysterio mask. I guess, apart from being a Messiah and a very benevolent god, he's also a dickish troll. The Messiah Maniacs beat up Aleister and Humberto. We get another big stomp from Seth on Aleister Black. I didn't even watch last week, and it feels very samey. From what we saw in the recap just before this thing, and here it's it's the same thing basically played out again. Yay! Backstage, Randy Orton's being interviewed, and he basically says, hey, psst, I'm gonna go interrupt the Peep Show. Up next, it's the Peep Show. Christian's back on TV, and he welcomes his former brother, now just best friend, Edge, as his guest. And right away, things are interesting, because Christian starts needling Edge and kind of giving some harsh truths about, I don't think you have it in you, I think you're running on fumes, and you're lying to yourself if you think you're gonna do well at Backlash, putting the seeds of doubt into Edge. And Edge comes back, he says he's got that doubt. He has the anxiety and the pressure of trying to live up to this moniker of the greatest wrestling match ever. And he starts to explain maybe he doesn't have as much gas in the tank. Christian jumps on him again. So he's just making excuses. And what about your mother? She believed in you and all that stuff. Do it for mama. And he tells Edge, if you're not going to show up at Backlash, then go home right now. And Edge is all pumped up, and Christian's like, you passed the test. And like, we all believe in you. We all think you're going to do great against Randy Orton. Then Orton shows up on the big screen and basically talks down what Edge and Christian are doing here. And he asks Edge, what's going to happen to you when you fail to live up to the expectations of this matchup and yourself here years ago? Go back home to your family. Orton wants to end the revival and the resurgence of Edge, and Edge defiantly says it's not going to happen. And he spikes the mic and he leaves. I love this segment just because I love the intensity of Christian on the microphone here and the way he kind of pumped up this kind of like reverse psychology thing with Edge. What Orton did, asking the question, what will you do if you fail to live up to expectations? I feel that is a writing failsafe with this story because, what if the match does suck or it's not going to actually be the greatest wrestling match ever? They can say, oh, Edge failed to live up to expectations, so he's going to take a few months off or something. That's what I got from that. I mean, it's just one little tiny little wrinkle, but they can go, oh, maybe it didn't live up to expectations, though it wasn't the greatest match ever. It seems to really, boy, you can fill a book with the amount of weird stuff going on with why they're building the match this way. Backstage, MVP's being interviewed wearing a Shad Gaspard shirt. He plugs the VIP lounge later in the night. Suddenly we see R-Truth, the new 24/7 champion as of last week. He's trying to find some place to hide, so he and MVP are having a confrontation. Out pops Lashley to put R-Truth in the full Nelson, the very dreaded finishing maneuver. They're really doing a good job. I think the last couple of weeks they've done a really good job putting over the severity of that move. So Lashley leaves Truth lane, but come on. You want to see Lashley win that championship and make it champion versus champion at Backlash. The story writes itself. It's time for the latest in the wacky adventures of the Street Profits and the Viking Raiders. Last week was a bowling competition, and now it's tied at 2 apiece between the teams. So the tiebreaker seemingly is the Decathalon. And this is a pretty stretched out skit here, all the different events. Some benefit the Viking Raiders, some benefit the Profits. My favorite part of this is there's a sword fighting round. You got Montez. He's all geared with, nope, I forfeit. He just quits. I thought it was pretty funny. There's a dance-off round, and Ivar dances to Fandango's theme, and they keep the running gag going of, oh, Ivar is cute, but Eric, not so much. But then the Decathalon, there's some funny stuff, there's some cringe stuff as well. After the final round of pole vaulting and some very clever editing, the Decathalon itself ends in a tie. So it's a draw after all this time. I don't think they ever really established, I think there's a lot of predictions that they're going to have a tag team championship match at Backlash, but that was never made clear on Raw as far as I could tell. Maybe that'll be announced over the weekend online or something, but I thought that was kind of the natural way they were going to go with this. Apollo Crews sets up this next match, a #1 contendership match for the U.S. Championship. You got Kevin Owens, Andrade, and Angel Garza. Of course, Kevin Owens has lately been kind of running alongside Apollo Crews here. It's going to be super disappointing when the inevitable heel turn happens from Kevin. As the match goes on, it's very much 2-on-1, Andrade and Angel working against Kevin Owens. But eventually, of course, as these kind of handicap matches turn out, or these glorified handicap matches turn out, the partnership dissolves, the two friends are fighting each other. Zelina Vega tries to break things up, but she gets taken down by both guys, and so then she's gone for the rest of the matchup here. And this is a really good matchup. That whole ballyhoo with Andrade and Zelina and Angel notwithstanding, they might have actually added to it too. I think the athleticism and what they did in this matchup, I think this was probably my favorite match of the night, all told. It ends when Kevin hits a stunner on Angel, but then Andrade kicks Kevin off him, pins Angel to win. So he's going to be facing Apollo soon again. I was a little disappointed about that. I thought, maybe now's the time to kind of like move away from Andrade, but, maybe we'll do that after this match happens. Charlotte's interviewed backstage, asked about losing the championship on Sunday at TakeOver in your house, and Charlotte says, I didn't lose the match because I was not pinned, nor did I submit. She says she's elevated the NXT Women's Division. I'm not so sure about that. Then Asuka dances her way into the shot, and Charlotte is pissed. Like, can't you just be serious for once? And Asuka goes, yes. And she slaps Charlotte in the face, pow, and then she walks off, adding a little bit of revenge for the cheap shot at the end of the tag team match from earlier before. Hall of Famer Kurt Angle gives his thoughts on what makes a great wrestling match, and he says, I'd hate to be Edge or Randy Orton right now because the title of greatest wrestling match ever sounds like a lot of pressure. He gives his pick to win. He thinks it's going to be Edge. It's true. It's true. Then we see the Viking Raiders backstage talking with the champion, Drew McIntyre. And I like they kind of carried on the running gag of, oh, Ivar, people think you're cute. Eric, not so much. I like the fact they took that joke and they took it out of the confines of those segments with the Street Profits. Okay, now it's kind of, the joke is taking a life of its own. I kind of like that it kind of crosses that boundary. And then Drew provides a lot of exposition. I think he kind of filled in for the Street Profits on this night. It's like, oh, and then this is going to happen next, and this is going to happen next. He says in this very kind of introductory kind of or announce-ish kind of tone. It was very like, oh, the Street Profits, they're not going to be on TV for another 5 minutes, so I guess Drew's got to do the job for him. It's time for the VIP lounge. The guest is supposed to be Bobby Lashley, but as MVP's making his introduction, Drew McIntyre shows up and says, thank you for introducing me and telling me all my accomplishments and everything, how great my finisher is. And MVP says, I'm not talking about your finisher, I'm talking about the full Nelson. And Drew talks about how, he's been hitting MVP with the Claymore so many times lately and how he hides behind Lashley. He says that, or he alleges that MVP is the Yoda to Bobby Lashley's Luke Skywalker. Finally, Lashley is about to jump Drew from behind, but Drew turns, stops him, and then he repeats the cold dead hands line from the last couple of weeks. He turns around again to headbutt MVP, turns back around to Lashley. Lashley doesn't jump him, and Drew's just staring him down. Like, man, I know last week he was made to look, he was beaten down. He was putting the full Nelson to close out Raw last week. Big turnaround here. He does not stay on the defensive for very long, does Drew McIntyre in this push. So then the Viking Raiders come out, and then the Street Profits are with them. And we have the next match. You got MVP and Lashley versus the Viking Raiders, and Drew and the Profits are watching at ringside as the match goes on. I mean, the match went pretty well. I think Lashley's looking really strong here. Not staying down for long is Bobby Lashley in this matchup. Mid-promo, though, Lana's interviewed watching the monitor, and she says, she's just trying to be a good wife and listen to her husband as he requests that she doesn't not be at ringside for his matches anymore. But then says, it allows me time to focus more on my own career, and 2020 is going to be the year of Lana. Yeah, I feel after everything that we've seen in 2020, if it became the year of Lana, I wouldn't even be surprised. Lashley takes out Ivar right in front of Drew McIntyre at ringside. He blind tags his way into the match and puts the full Nelson on Eric to win for his team. Then afterward, he wants to put more of a hurting on Ivar. The Street Profits try and break it up. Drew hits a Claymore on Bobby, but he falls out of the ring and pretty much lands right in his feet. Like, not really selling it that much, but he is kind of staggered a bit. We see more stare down between Drew and Bobby. I have to say, I think that the build on this night looked good. Lashley has looked like a really good, credible opponent here at MVP. Just in the last couple of weeks, has done a great job helping elevate Lashley and make him look like a real threat. In your main event, before my voice finally gives out, it's Asuka versus Charlotte Flair, the latest in the long and storied and incredibly one-sided rivalry these two have had. Sasha and Bayley show up again doing commentary during the match, and then as the match goes on, the Iconics show up and they beat up the champs and chase them off. They're all ejected from the match after that commercial break. And as far as the match goes, it's a good match. Great work from these two. They have really great chemistry together every time they face off. I enjoyed the back and forth in this matchup. In the end, though, Nia Jax gets on the apron and distracts Asuka, and that allows Charlotte to capitalize with a big boot. She pins her, and Asuka kicks out at 3.5. Like, just as the hand comes down for 3, she gets up and tries to kind of like show she still has fight. But in the end, Charlotte wins once again in this rivalry. The women's champion has been defeated in this non-title match. So yeah, Charlotte wins again. Nia drops Asuka one more time for good measure as we fade to black. I don't know. The match, like I said, the match itself was great. The cheap finish, you could say in isolation, well, that protects Asuka. She doesn't, she wasn't beat clean straight up by Charlotte. But you know what? She's already lost clean to Charlotte a couple of times. Then last week was the count-out loss. How many times? It's not really protecting her when she never gets that win back. I'm not saying it's never going to happen, but at this point, it's been frustrating. I feel like I did a real disservice in my TakeOver review the night before because I didn't really talk about the implications of Charlotte's just meaningless championship reign as NXT Women's Champion. Because what did she do? How did she help the women's division in the brief time she was champion? I feel like she totally halted Rhea Ripley's momentum, which in turn also kind of undid a lot of the impact of Rhea beating Shayna Baszler. Io is the champion now, which is nice, but Io didn't beat Charlotte for that distinction. It's Charlotte. I think it's baffling to me how much they try and protect her when I don't think she's been I don't know. She's a great wrestler. Okay, I'll say that. She's a great wrestler. A couple botches here and there, but everyone makes mistakes. Fine. I think that it's a weird that they're building so much around her. I will say, in that defense, I will say that she's built as this big heel for people to eventually beat her. She, I think, was very pivotal in making Sasha, making Becky, and to a lesser extent, Bayley. But it's been a long time since she made any of those ladies. And I think that since then, who has she really helped? Who has she really elevated? Besides that, certainly not Asuka. I don't think she helped elevate Rhea Ripley or Io Shirai. So, like, what is the point for this? Triple H said in the conference call over the weekend that, the booking will make sense for Charlotte in 3 to 4 months. But God, at the rate they're losing viewers, like, do they even have that long? I've been kind of standing back, when it comes to the Charlotte hate. But at this point, I don't hate her. I just think it's like, what is the point? I've always been kind of a wait and see kind of person. But yeah, at this point, like, I think people are tired of waiting and wanting to see. They want to see like some kind of action besides what they're seeing now. My grade for this week's Raw is a C+. For a go-home show for Backlash, I think they did a pretty good job, especially building up Drew and Bobby Lashley, and I really enjoyed the triple threat match for the #1 contendership for the U.S. title. The Peep show, I think, was great. I could listen to Edge and Christian and Orton cutting promos all day. I think they're all really great at what they've been doing, Edge and Orton especially since the build to WrestleMania. And Asuka and Charlotte, it was a good match. The finish was cheap, and in a bubble, I could forgive it. But God, it's like, how many times we're going to see this happen over and over again? I mean, it helps Charlotte, but you're waiting for that kind of thing of paying it forward. When is that going to pay off and really elevate somebody? Like I said, we haven't seen that. The last person she really elevated or helped elevate was Becky Lynch, and that was 2 years ago. And, something more recent should happen, I'd say, more recent than what we've had. So it's a really, I don't know, it's really tricky because, she's good, but they need to do something differently with her. I don't know what that is. I hate to say, oh, this is bad, but not offer any kind of like resolution. But that's just kind of how I feel right now. I know a lot of other viewers are very disenfranchised right now about Charlotte Flair. But yeah, that's just kind of how I felt. I'd say it was it was an above average show. It helped sell a couple of things for Backlash for me, more so than like previous weeks. But yeah, besides that, there was, a couple of stinkers in there too. Just a couple of things where I thought, I've seen enough of this. But let me know what you thought about Raw this week in the comment section below. This is the last time you'll get to give a letter grade to Raw, as after this Wednesday, they're going to close the polls and get rid of those entirely here on YouTube. But thanks for watching, folks. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.